Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Toronto Metropolitan University School of Medicine's Town Hall. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. And because the School of Medicine will be located in Brampton, we do a land acknowledgement that refers to that particular land. Brampton and its surrounding area, the Peel region, are part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We acknowledge that these lands are also the shared space of Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe Chippewa, and the Métis people. We honor the Indigenous peoples who cared for this land for thousands of years before us and commit to valuing the two-row wampum. This living treaty represents settlers and Indigenous peoples moving forward together in parallel, respecting each other's ways of being, knowing, and doing. We honor the dish with one spoon treaty, and in this spirit, we strive to treat the land and people of our community with mutual respect, taking only what we need and sharing what is available to ensure sustainability for those that follow us. My name is Lisa Barnoff, and I will be your host for this morning's session. I'm the Interim Associate Dean of Equity and Social Accountability at the School of Medicine at TMU. I'm also the faculty liaison with the Office of the Vice President, Equity and Community Inclusion, and an associate professor with the School of Social Work. Since I joined TMU in 2003, I've been passionate about building and implementing systems that promote equity and inclusion. And therefore, I couldn't be happier to support TMU's plans to open a medical school with equity and social accountability at its foundation. Our panelists and I are excited to spend this time with you this morning to share information and answer questions that you may have about the school. Just a few housekeeping notes before we begin. All participant microphones and cameras will be turned off during the presentation. At any time throughout the presentation, though, please feel free to ask any questions that you may have in the question panel. We'll get to as many of your questions as we can at the end of the session. And please also note that this session is being recorded. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here's an overview of our session for today. We'll start with a general progress update for the School of Medicine. At our last series of town halls in November 2022, we heard from the TMU community that equity, diversity, and inclusion, as well as postgraduate medical education, were topics of particular interest. And so we're pleased that we have significant progress that we can share in those particular areas with you today. I'm joined today by three members of the School of Medicine executive team. I will introduce them briefly now, and you'll hear from each one of them in turn throughout the presentation. Dr. Teresa Chan is the Dean of the School of Medicine and Vice President, Medical Affairs at TMU. Teresa will provide an overview of the School of Medicine's key milestones over the past year. Dr. Jamaica Cass is the Indigenous Health Lead and Special Advisor to the Dean, Indigenous Resurgence. Jamaica will provide an overview of the progress in the Indigenous Health portfolio. And Dr. Trudy McFarlane is the Black Health Lead and Special Advisor to the Dean on Black Flourishing. Trudy will provide an overview of progress in the Black Health portfolio. And finally, Dr. Brent Thoma is the Interim Associate Dean, Postgraduate Medical Education. Brent will provide an overview of the School of Medicine's residency program. Teresa, Jamaica, Trudy, and Brent will be glad to answer any questions you may have at the end of the presentation. With that, I turn it over to you, Teresa, to take us all through the School of Medicine's progress.
Excellent. Hello, welcome and good morning. My camera needs to turn on. There you go. Hello. I'm really excited to be here to speak with you on this topic, and it is a passion of mine since I took the job in July. And so we'll go to the next slide so we can give you some updates. Just to remind you, these are the 5 pillars that were derived around a lot of community consultation, especially with many of you who probably are watching this webinar right now, who kind of helped us see what we could be in the future. And it's a big reason why I'm here, because these 5 pillars really resonate with me. We're looking to make sure that we are community-centric and really emphasizing outpatient and primary care, generalism, all of those really important things that help people keep people healthy. Culturally respectful care, so that we can make sure that people actually feel seen and at home, even in the most stressful of times when their healthcare is, or their own health is at risk. Information and innovation and technology, especially in today's world of misinformation, is really important for a medical school to keep at the core of their mission. Is how do we leverage technology and innovation for good and combat some of the misinformation that's out there. Interprofessional healthcare and involving networks of people to take care of patients, and knowing that we are certainly not alone in our journey to be able to make our communities healthier. We want to make sure that we have physicians who really understand how they work within the system to be able to leverage it for our patients' benefits. And then finally, we want to support the health and well-being of seniors, and not just those who are senior patients, but also senior clinicians who are looking to, transition, like my father has done, from being a tried and true clinician for many years, but now into being in his grandpa phase, where he is there to be able to spend time with his grandsons and do great stuff in a different phase of his life. And I think we need to be supporting lots of people in that transition over the next couple of years. So we'll go to the next slide. And our journey so far has included a lot of really key milestones. We are still only a bit along the way towards the 2025 launch, but we've come a long way already. And so January 2023 is when the Bramley Civic Center was confirmed as the future site. It's a beautiful building that we're going to retrofit and work on making it the hub for the School of Medicine. March 2023, the Senate approved the establishment of the School of Medicine. May 2023, the Senate approved the MD program. July 2023, a founding dean was appointed, and that was me. And July 2025 is when we're going to launch the residency programs with 105 postgraduate seats that have been allocated to us. And in September 2025, we will have the MD program launch, which will have 94 seats. Next slide, please. So this is the picture of the Civic Center, and as you can see, it's a fairly large building. It doesn't even fit on that photo. I'm just kidding. But really what it is that it's the Bramley Civic Center. It has a large auditorium that's been recently placed in it, and we're going to keep that running during the operations and renovations of our School of Medicine. We have the South Wing, which is has part of the library that can be opened by 2025, and then we're going to phase in the other parts of the building, so it'll unfold, and we'll have constantly new ceremony for new parts of the building that'll open up along the way. And then the design strategies are really inclusive and have really tried to take the heart of what we want to build around this medical school and make it real. And so student-centered spaces are going to be all over the building. We're going to make sure we integrate state-of-the-art technologies, and we're going to make sure that we work with our architects to make the feel of the building very very aligned with the inclusiveness that we want to emulate. Next slide, please. So this is an example of what that front of the building may someday look like. Obviously those trees won't grow to be that size overnight, but I'm thinking this is a picture of 20, maybe 35 or something like that, where the trees have had a couple of years to grow, and we'll have a vibrant medical school community around this. Next slide. We have secured several clinical affiliations, and these are sites where our trainees, when they go and do their experiential learning as medical students, or really as embedded as residents, will journey into these spaces to be able to learn the craft of being a doctor. And so our primary clinical site is Sibylle Melzer, and we're very excited to partner with them to make sure that we have learners in Brampton Civic Hospital, Peel Memorial, and Etobicoke General. And then we have finalized the affiliation agreement with Trillium Health Partners as well. And that's going to be on November 1st. And that's going to be really exciting because they have Credit Valley, Mississauga Hospital, and Queensway Health Center And we are into discussions with additional partners as well to be able to make sure that we have lots of placements that are excellent for our learners. Next slide, please. And I think many people are really wondering about, what does our admissions process look like? And right now we're in the process of seeking that preliminary accreditation for our School of Medicine from a body called CACMS, the Committee on Accreditation of Canadian Medical Schools. And this is the authority that grants the ability for a school to be able to give an MD degree. CACMS has very strict rules around when we can begin recruitment, and we have to we really have to receive the preliminary accreditation before we can actually share details and recruit students. And so we have some data that we can share with you as to what we're hoping to accomplish, but the details of exactly how many words an essay might be or what a GPA might be, that can't be publicized for now until we receive our preliminary accreditation from CACMS, because without the CACMS approval, we can't actually exist as a School of Medicine. So we don't want to spoil the fun by doing something too early. Next slide, please. What we can share is that the School of Medicine is aiming to, in line with our interests in making sure that we have equity baked in all of our structures, we're looking for holistic admissions processes that embed principles of anti-racism, accessibility, EDI, and reconciliation into the admissions process itself. We will, like many schools in Canada, factor in your academic progress and performance to date, that you are in an undergraduate degree of, but we don't really care which discipline, so you can be in any discipline and we'll welcome that diversity. And academic and extracurricular or professional experience will be definitely welcomed. The process will also be designed to purposefully admit equity deserving students and to select applicants who are interested in primary care and generalism and at large, and really making sure that people are well equipped from the get-go attitudinally to be able to support the mandate of what we're trying to meet. And then the MCAT is not something that we're going to be requiring. So next slide. All right. So this is the executive team, and we've hired some interim associate deans right now to really take on really great work. You're going to hear from Trudy, Brent, and Jamaica, and you've already heard from Lisa. So I'll just talk about Dorothy, who is our interim associate dean, undergraduate medical education. She is overseeing all of our accreditation processes for the CACMS and for the MD program. And so we're really indebted to her for her leadership right now. We also have Kamal Haider, who is the interim associate dean of clinical faculty relations, and he's helping us hire a whole bunch of faculty members right now. And we're really excited to also have assistant deans that are currently being selected or selected already but haven't started yet. And so we'll be welcoming more members to our team. Next slide, please. And I think that we want to make sure that people know that we are truly committed to EDI and reconciliation, and we're going to make sure that we infuse that throughout the assets of the School of Medicine, everything from the clinical faculty policy all the way through to the way that we select our learners. We are trying to make sure that we pour equity into the foundation of the School of Medicine. And we really want to commit to truth, reconciliation, anti-racism, and justice to really achieve that inclusion and optimal health for all. Next slide, please. All right, we're going to now pivot over to Dr. Jamaica Cass, and I think Lisa is going to come back on screen to kick us off to the next section.
Thank you, Teresa. One of the School of Medicine's main focuses is addressing barriers to inclusion in medical schools and diversifying the physician workforce. We are prioritizing the inclusion of equity-deserving groups for which there is strong evidence of underrepresentation in the medical profession. These include Indigenous and Black applicants, individuals with disabilities, and other equity-deserving groups as well. These groups have also been shown to experience disproportionate harms from healthcare systems. The School of Medicine is committed to locating and removing barriers for applicants from these communities and to providing comprehensive wraparound services for students with these identities to ensure that they feel safe and supported throughout their medical school journey. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Jamaica Cass to provide an update on the Indigenous Health portfolio.
Thank you, Lisa. As Indigenous Health Lead and Special Advisor to the Dean on Indigenous Resurgence, my role is to ensure that Indigenous health and decolonization are infused into every aspect of the School of Medicine. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. This includes developing an Indigenous admissions pathway, pursuing Indigenous community engagement, and building an Indigenous health curriculum. Accountability and thoughtful, reciprocal relationships with Indigenous communities are critical to advancing reconciliation and improving Indigenous health. TMU is committed to developing meaningful relationships with Indigenous communities through a co-creation approach, and to learning from these communities about reconciliation and Indigenous health in a medical school context. Co-creation is a long-term process of relationship and trust building that ensures all parties are able to define the terms of the relationship and to build in accountability mechanisms. Next slide, please. As the School of Medicine's Elder and Senior Advisor, Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, Joanne Delier's guidance has been critical to the development of the School of Medicine. Joanne also co-chairs our Indigenous Communities Council with me, which provides strategic guidance on all aspects of the school's work. I am so fortunate to have Joanne as a mentor and colleague. We're grateful to Joanne for her leadership and dedication to advancing Indigenous health. Next slide, please. Addressing underrepresentation of Indigenous students in medical education is central to the School of Medicine's work. We are committed to intentionally recruiting Indigenous students through a facilitated admissions pathway. Admissions criteria were drafted with the support of a working group of Indigenous people and have been reviewed and endorsed by the school's Indigenous Communities Council. We will ensure that Indigenous students are supported throughout their medical journeys and with well-resourced programs. We will also commit to creating an inclusive, equitable learning environment that provides cultural safety to Indigenous learners and to Indigenous faculty and staff members. Next slide, please. All learners will take part in a longitudinal Indigenous health course that is explicitly anti-racist and strengths-based. Content for this course was developed by the educational consulting group Atmos Indigenous with my oversight, and course content will be largely delivered by Indigenous facilitators. The School of Medicine will also provide cultural safety training to all community members and structure the recruiting process to ensure that all students value equity, diversity, inclusion, and reconciliation. Next slide, please. We are exploring partnerships with a number of organizations, including the Indigenous Physicians Association of Canada, the National Consortium for Indigenous Medical Education, the Canadian Medical Protective Association, the Peel District School Board, and the University of Toronto School of Medicine's Community of Support. We've also begun grassroots school engagement. Best practices in Indigenous medical school admissions indicate that it really isn't enough to support Indigenous applicants starting just at the beginning of the admission cycle. Engagement needs to start during elementary and secondary school so that these young Indigenous learners can see themselves represented in the medical field, as well as university leadership. In December, the School of Medicine will be holding a signing ceremony for our relationship agreement with the Indigenous Primary Healthcare Council to honor Indigenous traditions of partnership. This organization supports the advancement and evolution of Indigenous primary care service provision and planning throughout Ontario. So we look forward to working with them on some of our goals within the Indigenous health portfolio. Next slide, please. Evidence shows that diverse Indigenous approaches to healthcare are not well understood or well integrated into traditional Western healthcare. The Truth and Reconciliation Report calls upon those who can affect change within Canadian healthcare to both acknowledge the value and increase the use of Indigenous healing practices when requested. These practices should be used in collaboration with healers and elders. It's important to note that this requires meaningful commitment to cultural safety within the medical system, which is not yet in place. When working with Indigenous patients and communities, physicians need to have the skills and knowledge to understand and apply a holistic framework. This crucial teaching will be woven throughout the undergraduate curriculum with knowledge consolidation in the Indigenous health course. I will now turn it over to Dr. Trudy McFarlane, who will provide an update on the Black Health portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jamaica Cass. I'm hopeful that everyone can see me okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. Thank you. The Black Health Portfolio supports the advancement of the School of Medicine's EDI strategy and action plan and decolonization goals. My role as Black Health Lead and Special Advisor to the Dean on Black flourishing in medicine and healthcare is to provide guidance and leadership on Black health and community engagement within every facet of the School of Medicine. Next slide, please. We can proceed to the next slide. Like Indigenous students, Black students are significantly underrepresented in the medical field. Our facilitated admissions pathway is designed to intentionally recruit Black applicants to the School of Medicine. The pathway was finalized by the Black Admissions Pathway Working Group earlier this month. We are committed to fostering an inclusive, equitable, and culturally safe learning environment to ensure that Black medical learners feel well supported. Next slide, please. Black Health will be incorporated into all curriculum and course descriptions. A particular focus will be placed on Black Health through the first 2 weeks of the curriculum, as well as in courses such as the Health System Sciences and Community and Global Health courses. Health System Sciences will teach medical students how the healthcare system works, and this knowledge will enable them to advocate for equity as doctors of tomorrow. Next slide, please. Black communities and organizations in Brampton and Peel, with which we are exploring partnerships, include Roots Community Services, the Black African Caribbean Health and Social Services Hub, as well as the Peel District School Board. We are so excited to be working with the Peel District School Board on a Pathways program that will prioritize underrepresented youth and expose them to post-secondary education opportunities leading to careers in healthcare. We are also arranging community engagement visits to Peel District School Board, with goals of opening students' minds and the possibilities before them. Recognizing that there is a wealth of knowledge, experience, and expertise within TMU, we are also building collaborative relationships with groups, including the Faculty of Community Services and prospectively the TMU's Black Scholarship Institute. We are also working with neighboring educational institutions such as U of T's Community of Support to ensure we are supporting underrepresented youth from an early age. Finally, we are exploring partnerships with a range of provincial and national organizations such as the Black Physicians of Canada, the Black Physicians Association of Ontario, and the Black Health Education Collaborative, as well as Black Health Alliance. Next slide, please. Last year, TMU signed on to the Scarborough Charter on Anti-Black Racism and Black Inclusion in Higher Education. This document commits the university to specific goals and actions to eliminate anti-Black racism across the institution and to promote Black inclusion and establish the conditions for Black community members to thrive. TMU is committed to the eradication of anti-Black racism and the removal of systemic barriers to equity, inclusion, and social justice that limit Black community members, while also fostering an environment that makes it possible for one to thrive and prosper and flourish. We are also embedding the principle of Ubuntu into all facets of the School of Medicine. Ubuntu is a Bantu term that is sometimes translated, I am because we are. Ubuntu represents dignity and respect for all humanity, and understanding this in the context of one another and this principle will drive the School of Medicine's work. A top priority of the Black Health portfolio is working to ensure cultural safety and a sense of community for all, with a particular focus on that of Black faculty, students, staff, and patients alike. Thank you. I'll turn it now over to Lisa.
Thank you, Trudy. And before you, thank you, Jamaica. The School of Medicine, as Dr. Chan said, will welcome its first cohort of medical residents in July of 2025. For those of you who may not know, a resident is both a learner and an employee that's completed medical school who is undertaking additional training in a medical specialty. Dr. Brent Thoma, our Interim Associate Dean of Postgraduate Medical Education, will now provide an update on the school's postgraduate education program.
Thank you, Lisa. And I think, yeah, it's important to stress that, this training isn't an optional set of training. There's no doctors that enter practice in Canada without having training after their completion of their MD degree. So these are the programs that our students and other students beginning in 2025 in July will begin training at TMU. Next slide, please. So there's a few things I want to talk about today. The big ones are, I think there's probably the biggest questions in this area are, what programs are we going to have, and sort of the numbers of residents they're going to be in each of them, as well as we'll focus on that. So in terms of how we're deciding that, we have a principles-based approach that we're taking to that, with 3 principles really guiding which programs we're going to start and how we are going to engage in postgraduate medical education. Next slide, please. So the first principle that we're keeping in mind is increasing access to physicians in Brampton, Peel, and surrounding communities. So this is an area that has been historically underserved by physicians, as relatively lower physician numbers than most of its surrounding communities and the Greater Toronto area in general. So we're going to try and start programs initially that are going to be aimed at having a rapid impact on the accessibility of physicians in the region. So senior family medicine physicians that are doing subspecialty training in a particular area, geriatricians and general internal medicine specialists, they have 1 or 2 year training programs. So hopefully we'll be delivering physicians that are graduated through TMU programs by as early as 2026 and 2027. And then we need to work with our partners and our clinical affiliates to retain many of those doctors. We have a sort of a soft target of trying to retain more than 80% of those. Next slide. And as part of that, we also want to make sure that we're building capacity for junior learners. So inherently, by graduating those residents and then keeping those learners as our faculty members, we're going to build our capacity to train medical students as well as junior residents, just as the need for that capacity is ramping up. In addition, the residents will play a key role in being involved in medical education as well, like they'll be involved in training our medical students. Next slide. And then we want to try and do this ideally by staying true to the School of Medicine's mission that I think has been touched on numerous times in the presentation prior to now. But aspects that we haven't touched on necessarily are we have focused on generalism. So primary care will be 60% of the positions that we have in our residency programs. And some of the specialty areas in family medicine that we're going to focus on are really in areas of need. So that includes things like care of the elderly, as well as addictions medicine, palliative care, emergency medicine, so we can keep our emergency departments open and staffed. And we really want to reflect in our residency training program, similar to how they're doing it in undergraduate medical education, but not as well defined yet, ensuring that we are incorporating culturally respectful care, as well as innovative technology use and interprofessionalism. Next slide. So to provide a bit of an update on where we're at, our accreditation timelines are different than undergraduate, but we do need to get all of our postgraduate programs accredited. We first need to submit institutional accreditation about a weekish from now, so at the start of December. So that will be our first major milestone in working towards bringing these residents to TMU. Then the specialty programs, so all of the training programs other than the family medicine ones, we have a deadline of January 31st. And then the family medicine programs will need to submit the accreditation for on March 1st. So we have sort of rapid deadlines that we're working towards, but hitting all of those will put us in place to accept learners in basically it will be 17 different postgraduate training programs for July 1st, 2025. And that will result in us bringing 105 resident physicians to TMU, Brampton, Peel, and surrounding communities in just our first year. So I think this is the first time you will really see that tangible impact of medical trainees from TMU in our hospitals and in our community. Next slide. That's the last one.
Thank you, Brent. Okay, we're now going to open the discussion for your questions. Please feel free to ask any questions you have in the chat panel. I know we're getting some of them already, and we will try to answer as many of them as possible. We have already received questions in advance, so we're going to start with one of those. And if you have any more, please just throw them in the chat. So the first question, I'm going to invite Dr. Cass to respond, and I'll just read it. Can you talk about why we will ensure recruited students are committed to EDI and reconciliation instead of EDI and decolonization? This is an interesting choice. Over to you, Jamaica.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we need to be really careful when we use these terms. I think they're often used interchangeably, but they really do have different meanings. Decolonization is the dismantling of colonial structures and institutions, or the removal or undoing of colonial elements. Reconciliation, on the other hand, is about relationship building. In order to do this, we first must uncover truth, and then we work towards building trust with Indigenous communities through accountability, transparency, and continuous engagement with the Indigenous people that we serve. So to be clear, we intend to recruit learners that are committed to both of these things. The term reconciliation was used in the context specifically to which we're referring because we're really building something new. And so reconciliation more applied here as opposed to the dismantling of structures because we really are generating a new school. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamaica. Okay, next question. I'm going to invite Dr. McFarland to respond first, but Dr. Cass, you may also have a response. Okay, here's the question. When you say Black health or Indigenous health, does this mean that race-based medical data will be collected and used? For example, Black men are more likely to develop prostate cancer, or that diabetes is also more common among African Americans and Asian Americans compared to Caucasian ethnicity?
Thank you for the question. I would say it is part of it. So I think incorporating some of the research and data around conditions that affect one population over another is really important. In Canada, historically, there hasn't been a whole lot of data that supports race-based data collection. And so certainly that is something we'd like to work with our community partners as well as different faculties through TMU to provide culturally safe race-based data research. So that is one part of it. The other part of it is understanding the different approaches to healthcare and medicine and in different groups and what that may look like. And certainly we want to take a culturally responsive approach to healthcare. So not a one size fits all, and understanding the nuances that might be connected to that. Additionally, we want to ensure that all folks feel seen and really incorporating an approach of co-creation with respects to medical care. And so there is Western medicine and science, but there is also cultural approaches that we do want to consider and work together with patients, with community to find treatment programs that work best for them. I don't know if you wanted to add anything further, Dr. Cass?
Sure, absolutely. I can touch a little bit on some things with respect to the Indigenous health aspect of things. So Dr. McFarland talked a little bit about like how we would safely collect data. And of course, with respect to collecting Indigenous data, we would absolutely abide by OCAP principles and the idea that Indigenous data is really is owned by Indigenous people, and we're very respectful of that. When we're looking at Indigenous health, what we really want to do is kind of step back and take a more holistic approach. So as opposed to just really focusing on physical health and the idea that the Western medicine often focuses more on really sick care than wellness, but really approaching things from the physical, spiritual, mental, as well as emotional health. And with an idea that we'll also do our best to be very inclusive and respectful of traditional healing practices. Of course, really avoiding the concept of pan-indigeneity and really celebrating the diverse nature of Indigenous health practices within Canada's First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to both of you. The next question I'm going to invite Dr. Chan to respond to. Will the new School of Medicine accept applications from current or prospective TMU graduate students who hope to pursue an MD and a PhD?
Thank you very much for the question, Lisa. I think there are different ways that people go about doing PhD work. I would actually suggest that Brett may want to speak to this, Dr. Thoma, as he's just finished his PhD years after he did his MD, and Dr. Cass did her PhD before she went into her MD. So I'm probably the least qualified person to answer this because they both have lived experiences. MD PhD programs are very specific programs. They're collaboratively funded from the government that currently within the 94 spots, we do not have allocations for those positions. However, I would say that people who become members of our school, if they choose to pursue, let's say, like a Rhodes Scholarship, or want to, during residency, try to intercalate some research blocks into their work to see if the research is what they want to do in their future, then I think that there are opportunities for us to customize their education in some ways. That being said, I think it depends on why you want to do your PhD and what kind of clinical work you want to do. And I would say that there are a diverse number of people that do their PhDs later on, for instance, like Dr. Thoma did, because you may not know what kind of research you want to do. You might not know what clinician you're going to be. And so it's hard at the MD level to always make that commitment to a discipline that is going to be your scientific discipline, and then map that all the way through to your clinical learning as well. Because sometimes you fall in love with a specialty and now you have this tension between what you did as your PhD and what you actually end up practicing, and they don't always mesh. They sometimes are not aligned enough for you to make those two worlds fit together someday as an academician. So there's a lot of different options out there, and many of us do. I myself did my master's work during my residency because then I knew I wanted to be a medical educator. Then I knew I wanted to do my master's of health professions education and do a thesis-based master's, which allowed me to open the door to understanding how to do educational research and scholarship, and that became my raison d'etre in many ways, and probably is why I'm here speaking with you today. So maybe I'll invite Dr. Thoma to speak to his experience of why he chose to do a PhD, almost 7 years in to after 2 master's degrees and an MD.
Yeah, I guess I was underqualified. I don't know. No, I was interested in doing the work and getting that background, and that's why I decided to pursue it. I already do a bunch of research, and I found that sometimes I was missing some of the foundational stuff and just knowing enough to get the right references in the right place. And it was really a meaningful thing for me to do, to put that all together when I did that. To speak specifically to the timing of graduate studies, obviously we can't say too much about what the admissions process looks like, and that's not my area anyways, but one other thing I'll mention is that there is something in residency called the Clinician Investigator Program. We're not starting that up on day one, and funding again is a bit complex, but it's something that allows the pursuit of graduate degrees, including master's degrees as well as PhDs within residency, which is often an attractive option, both for the reasons Dr. Chan mentioned, in terms of you really know what you're going to be doing and you're in the area that you're going to be doing it in. You're able to pursue advanced education at that time. And number two, the payment structure for it is relatively attractive. So you still get paid as a resident, which is, I would say, generally better than a lot of the grad students that I know, and you try and maintain your clinical skills through that time and come out the other side as a clinician scientist of some variety potentially. So those are some of the pathways, at least, that interject with PGME. And I don't know, just to be clear, I don't think, of course, someone with a master's degree or PhD could apply to our medical school as well. Like, I just need to make sure that that's clear. How exactly that's incorporated with the process, I can't speak to. So, Dr. Cass, did you want to speak to that as well?
I'll maybe just say that I love science. That's why I did a PhD. I like research. And my PhD is in breast cancer molecular biology, and I was really interested in cancer, and I wanted to know more, and I wanted to commit to evolving the body of evidence in the area, and so that's why I did it. So I absolutely think we'll be very excited about having folks who've done master's or other graduate programs, PhDs, apply to our medical school, and we'd love to have you.
Well, certainly the critical thinking that you learn during a PhD program or a master's program will get you into the zone of thinking critically as a clinician future on. And I think that they're critical skills that really work well and intercalate with what it is that you are actually hoping to do. So.
Okay, thanks everyone. I'm going to move to the next question, and we'll start with you, Dr. Chan, if you don't mind, but others may want to chime in as well. How will research at the School of Medicine integrate with the research happening at the downtown campus?
Yeah, I'm really excited to think about the possibilities of that. I'm trying to set up some meet and greets with some of our decadal leaders to think through that. I think that there's lots of synergy between the work that many of the clinicians currently do in the hospitals, within the communities, and the kind of community-based research that is that TMU is very famous for. I'm looking forward to finding collaborators to write tri-council grants with. I'm looking forward to helping people find someone who's an innovator within some lab downtown, and making sure that there's ways to collaborate. I did a tour of the library the other day, and there's these spaces where you can go to just like play around and learn how to do 3D printing, for instance. So I imagine some of our clinician faculty members who are being hired right now will be very excited to work and collaborate with some of our great minds of the faculty members who work within engineering and TRSM and the law school, and really, I imagine it'll be really exciting. And the undergraduate and the postgraduate phases, I will speak to the undergraduate phase, and then I'll hand it over to Brent to talk about how he envisions the grad learners actually integrating with research and scholarship. But we will have a lot of project work where we're going to be having the undergraduate learners, the MD program learners, really take on really cool projects, and they'll need supervisors, and that can be a supervisory team of both clinical faculty but also TMU main campus faculty. And the Zoom makes it so much easier for people to join on board with some of these supervisory duties now. So I think it'll be really exciting, and I think that I'll kick it over to Brent to talk about how we could integrate it within the postgrad program too.
Yeah, this is sort of one of my pet programs, or one that I've enjoyed thinking about the most. So we've passed policy within postgraduate medical education to support something called Learn Time. And Learn stands for leadership, education, advocacy, research, and non-clinical time. And it's sort of inspired by the concept of like 20% time from Google, where we want to create some space for residents to engage outside of the clinical environment and the other skill sets that they need. So residents that are doing well in their programs, aren't having any academic difficulties, will be able to look to sort of other areas. And this, I think, would be potentially in collaboration with other faculty and students at TMU to figure out what they want to pursue with a little bit of extra time that is cleared up for them every single month. So in some cases that might be research, in some cases that might be advocacy work, but in other cases that might be working on innovations with like a tech startup or something like that. If that's something that they want to pursue, we have a process to give them that time to be able to pursue that with those people. And that's honestly one of the biggest challenges in medical education. And you won't speak too much to residency other than to say that it isn't atypical for residents to be working 80 hours a week. And so providing some protected time for them to be pursuing these other things, I think will allow some really unique collaborations to happen from people who are really excited to get beyond the only clinical medicine space and collaborate on many of the cool things that are going on at TMU and beyond.
Okay, should I move on to next one? Yeah, okay, perfect. So I know all of you will likely have something to say on this one, but we'll open with Dr. McFarland, if that's okay, and then other folks can answer as well. Are there any opportunities for involvement, such as volunteering, within the School of Medicine?
Thank you for the question. I absolutely believe there will be opportunities coming forth, certainly once we are established as a formal school and have things up and running. I think in the interim, I think there are creative ways perhaps to get involved. And a big piece of some of the work that we're doing is community engagement and community relations. And so maybe partnering with some of those community organizations in this work might be something that you may be interested in engaging in. We do have a few advisory committees as well, which again, depending on what your status is, whether you're staff, faculty, or student, there may be a place for you to get involved there. And so stay tuned for more information around those pieces for sure. And I think you may have heard us talk about our some of the partnerships and pathways programs that we are developing, one specifically with the Peel District School Board. And so as we're building that out, I think there will be tons of opportunity to get involved in something like that with us as well. So again, it's a matter of keeping informed, staying tuned to some of those opportunities as they present themselves. Would others like to share?
Anyone else want to jump in, or should I move to the next one?
I was just going to say that there are opportunities off of our website for you to just sign up and do that work, right? And I think it'll be awesome. So join in. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to move to the next one, and this one definitely makes sense to go first to Dr. Thoma. How will residency training at TMU be different from doing residency elsewhere?
So yeah, I think there's something unique about being a new institution. I think that's the first thing that I'll say. Without the established inertia of many policies, people, structures, to me, the first residents that are starting at TMU are hopefully going to be people that want to help build the TMU School of Medicine, help build their own residency program. And that's a really unique opportunity. I was the first resident in my program, and it was really amazing how I was able to contribute and also see that grow over time. So that's one thing. I think the second thing is that TMU in the School of Medicine throughout is very committed to equity, social accountability, diversity, inclusion, decolonization, in a way that, yeah, a lot of other schools are talking about that, but I don't know. I think working with Lisa, Jamaica, Trudy, we're really trying to take that on its core. I mean, my third principle in how we're doing allocations is to make sure that we get through this process without losing what we're trying to accomplish. And so I think that focus is going to be more extensive than it is at any other medical school or residency program, I think, I'm that person at the bullseye of the circle of privilege. Like this is not my area to necessarily speak to, but I know many of my colleagues and people that I work with don't always necessarily get a feeling of belonging when they're walking into an academic health science center. And I hope that TMU can be the place that they do feel that sense of belonging and want to come and train at. And that's, I think, what we're collectively trying to build together, a medical school and residency programs that are certainly reflective of the community that we are serving. The last thing to note is that, on things like diversity, that's actually something that postgraduate medical education has less control over. And the reason I say that is the majority of the students that are going to become residents in our school are graduates of our undergraduate programs. And we can't change who is graduating. And that's, our feeding pool into medical school, which is why I think the pathways work that Jamaica and Trudy is talking about is so incredibly important to getting those students into medical school so that we can match them in residency. Because otherwise, if we do better at diversity, it just means that other people don't in the country. The other thing that will, I think, contribute to our diversity, we will have a greater proportion of international medical graduates in our cohorts in residency, particularly in the first several years when we won't have any graduates of our own programs to match to our residency program. So approximately 30 to 50% of residents at most schools were medical students at that same school beforehand. We won't have that 30 to 50% of people. So we're going to certainly be trying to be an attractive place to match, but we'll probably end up with more graduates from international programs, including Canadian studying abroad, as well as physicians that have immigrated to Canada. So I feel like that's a question other people might want to comment on as well. I'm, seeking all of their guidance and wisdom as we talk about how we do that.
Thanks, Brent. Does anyone want to chime in right now? Or I think we might have time for one more question. We have 4 minutes to close. Yeah, I'm going to move to this last question, and apologies for those of you whose questions we didn't get to, but the next one that came in was this one. And I feel like it would be a nice one to end on. So again, with knowledge that it's 9:56 and we're closing out at 10, maybe we can popcorn, maybe each one of you can pop in and just have a quick response to this. Okay, here's the question. I know there was mention of accreditation and milestones coming up related to that. Outside of accreditation, are there any milestones you are excited to accomplish? And I know, of course, each one of you has many. So maybe I'll just ask each one of you as we close out in the last 2 minutes, if each of you could just offer what is maybe one milestone that you're most excited to accomplish outside of accreditation. Do you want to start, Teresa?
Sure, I think it's hiring the faculty. I think we're going to get some really exciting and amazing people to come work within the TMU environment. I think that's going to be really exciting. I'll floor it to Jamaica.
I think I'm most excited to be able to shout from the rooftops all about the Indigenous admissions pathway, so I can actually go out and start meeting potential applicants, telling them all about our program so that we can welcome applications.
And I'll jump in. I think I'm probably really excited about all the community engagement that I get to do in this role. So that includes the pathways programs, the admissions pathway, and really telling others about our school and what we have in store. And so I think for me, that is probably one of the exciting pieces for me. Brent?
Yeah. July 1st, 2025. I don't think there's anything I could say I'm more excited about than how the environment and that there's going to be created by the first trainees at our medical school actually walking onto campus and knowing that this is really there's lots of beginnings in this work, but the real beginning of education in the new institution. I don't think there's anything more exciting than that.
Okay, thanks to all 4 of you. I knew that'd be a great question to end on, is giving folks a sense of the passion that we all have for the school that we're building together with other folks at TMU and with the community of Brampton. So I want to thank everyone who joined us today. Thank you for your interest in the school, and we hope that you find some ways to become involved. I'm sorry that we didn't get to all the questions. If you have additional questions that you would like us to answer, please feel free to email them to medicine@torontomu.ca. And if you haven't already, we would encourage you to subscribe, that's a hard word to say, subscribe to our mailing list. This way you can be sure to receive all the latest updates about all of the things that we're up to and opportunities for involvement. So if you didn't already opt in to these updates when you registered for today's session, you can use the QR code on the screen to sign up right now. So in closing, again, I just want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank all the panelists. I want to thank all of the amazing folks behind the scenes who make this be able to be successful. Some of them are with us, but you don't see them, but they are here. Some of them, Brian Bose, sorry, Brian, if I'm pronouncing your last name incorrectly, Sonia Khan and Sanya Hossein. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.